It's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I'm a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you'd like to support this channel, get additional bonus live streams once a month, and behind-the-scenes looks at my work before anybody else, be able to read all my comics for free, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Join us on Patreon at jeremy.com, patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. You can tell I'm a little loopy today. Didn't get much sleep last night. Oh, anyway, if you would like to get a free digital sketchbook and get animated work in progress gifts of my work delivered to your inbox once a month, you can sign up for my newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. Like I said, you'll get once a month. I send out little blog posts along with any new pieces that I have finished. I'll post a couple of comic pages in each newsletter. It's all at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comics, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. I'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It's a self-contained black and white graphic novel, psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. Should be a preview on the page. There's links in the description. You can also go to you can also pick up my current series, Morning Star. It tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. The first trade has issues 1 through 4 in it. Pick those up at amazon.jeremy.net. And if you go to my main site, jeremy.net, you can pick up the last 4 issues of the series, including the final issue, issue 8, which I just recently published. All of that, jeremy.net. So links for all these in the link tree in the description to the video. All right. See here, Negro Frazetta's in the chat. Hey, what's up, man? Thank you for joining me. See here, thanks for joining us. Byron's here. What up, Byron? Thank you for dropping in. So, what do we have on deck today? Well, I finished the previous fan art piece that I was working on, the Snake Eyes versus Elektra. That's actually available at jeremy.net. But I'm not doing prints of that because, I don't know those characters, so I'm just doing the original piece. But I'm moving on to another fan art piece. I'm just in the mood to do a few pieces of fan art, play, have some fun in between projects. And I think I had mentioned to you before, and I may have even, I can't remember if I was working on this on the last live stream. Let's see, Negro Frazetta says to check out the Discord after the stream if I have time. That's right. Subscribers to Patreon, we have a Discord server where we share artwork, exchange ideas, talk, give each other feedback, goof around, share just general, art ideas and tips and theories and resources. So it's a fun place to hang out for fellow creatives if you guys would like to subscribe over there. Again, patreon.com/Jeremy, link in the description. I will definitely take a look over there and see what's going on in the Discord. Meanwhile, the new piece that I started, and I can't remember if I was working on this last week or not, I am doing Lobo versus Deadpool. So I had started with just let me get on my handy dandy tablet glove. And I think it's just the idea of having two Lobo is more indestructible in a cosmic sense because you see him there getting ready to fight Superman. But, just Deadpool and the fact of there's more like they're mercenaries with a bad attitude who can take a lot of damage. So I just thought that would be a fun matchup for these two. So I grabbed some reference. I already kind of worked out the pose that I wanted in terms of this thumbnail, and I'm just refining it. But once I kind of knew what I wanted pose-wise, I went and I grabbed a couple of shots. So there's a Kevin Nolan Lobo versus Superman there, a close-up of Lobo's face by Simon Beasley, Beasley is one of my favorite artists in general, but obviously, I don't know if he's the co-creator of Lobo along with Keith Giffen and Alan Grant, or whether somebody else drew Lobo first. Point being, that Beasley's the one I think of. Like, he's the artist that I first experienced Lobo with. So he's my favorite Lobo artist. And then for Deadpool, of course, who else am I going to use for reference but Rob Liefeld? So I got Liefeld here. Plus, I was going to take some reference for the costume from the Ryan Reynolds movie costume there. So I'm just using all those details as I go and I refine this this thumbnail. And I'm going to do two different versions of this piece. I'm going to do one where Lobo is ripping Deadpool apart, and then one where Deadpool's ripping Lobo apart. Just, you know, to kind of fair, balance it out. I see William's in the chat. Hey, William, thanks for joining us. So I'm just working on this this Lobo versus Deadpool fan art piece, and the real question is just a matter of how refined I'm going to get with this before I print it out on Bristol and ink it traditionally. And I think with this, well, you know what's funny? In a strange way, I can use almost the exact same color scheme that I did for the Snake Eyes Electra. It was just red and blues, and watercolor and acrylic, and you know, with Deadpool and Lobo, you know, I can like blue for his denim and his jacket, and blue highlights in his hair and such. And then obviously red and black for Deadpool's logo. The same color scheme kind of applies. All right. So I think the main thing I was doing at this point was just refining the pose and the position here. Let me make some tweaks here, get my pen settings to something. It'll give me lines that I want here. Turn down that opacity a little bit. There we go. Yeah, so at this point, it's just a matter of refining these details. I mean, for all we know, I may just speed through that. Well, I don't think I'll speed through it, but it could be that I'll get everything that I need in this thumbnail, and then just be good to go for jumping into a final ink drawing. Sorry, cat crawled underneath my desk. I was like, what the hell is that? If anything, what I really need to do, whoops, this eraser brush is way too large. Yeah. Really what I need to do is cut away. I've been trying to really simplify a bit more because I'm just got too much stuff kind of all over the place in my work. And I am looking to just streamline more. I don't know if I'm gonna, you know, when I imagine this, him getting ripped apart, I kind of see it like a Ryan Otley drawing. In fact, Ryan Otley would be great on Deadpool. I don't know if he's ever done any Deadpool, but you know, the idea, like, you know, I haven't read a lot of his post Invincible work, but Invincible was one of my favorite comics for quite a while. I mean, it never stopped being one of my favorites. I just didn't have time to keep up with it. But it was amazing to me that it's like he could do this like blood and guts and gore that's like on the level of The Walking Dead, but there's something just so over the top about it that's also kind of cartoonish. So instead of feeling like a slasher film, it starts feeling a bit more like Army of Darkness, where it's just like cartoon blood and guts. You know, the Sam Raimi of it all. I think that's what I'm kind of going for in this piece. Now, the real question here is, do I need to show the hand that's holding Deadpool's lower body? I could have him giving him a bloody wedgie. If I were to go in here and erase some of the guts that are right there. I mean, to a certain degree, it wouldn't even make sense. But who says it has to? This is kind of a crazy illustration, but I can have Lobo's hand reaching in, holding him from the waistband. So I'm just putting in a simple box form to indicate the wrist, knuckles. Doesn't even need to be as detailed as that. Look it up there at the reference, the biker gloves. I think that might work. This is one of those where, it comes down to, am I selling it in the drawing? Because, yeah, if you were going to rip a guy in half, you probably would not grab them from the waistband like that. But then again, it's a fan art of an alien fighting a mutant, comic book alien fighting a comic book mutant. Do I really need to be that concerned? When this is a piece that I should just have fun with. And like the Magic 8-Ball, I think signs lean towards no. No, I don't need to be that concerned. Just have fun with the piece. Let's see here. Amar's in the chat. He says, "What's up? What's up? Happy Sunday. Good to see you too, man." We are doing Lobo versus Deadpool. Drawing some more fan art here. I've got some reference up at the top. Like I said, a Kevin Nolan piece. Kevin Nolan, Lobo versus Superman, which there's a Lobo versus Superman comic that's coming out. And I forget who's writing it, but the artist is Mirka Andolfo. And it looks friggin' amazing. I need to get that thing. I want to say it's the team that does Money Shot. I think it's Tim Seeley and Sarah Beatty. I think that they are the ones doing the Lobo. Yeah, because I was listening to an interview with Tim Seeley, and he was talking about that. That's where I heard it. But anyway, so I've just got some reference inspiration pieces up here for while I'm working on this. A Simon Beasley Lobo, a Rob Liefeld Deadpool, and then Ryan Reynolds in the costume. So this is just the reference that I have up there. I mean, the pose is pretty much just made up out of my head. And what's interesting is I generally tell myself when I'm doing thumbnails, don't stick with your first thumbnail. Push yourself to try and come up with something new and different and innovative. But this first thumbnail that I drew, yeah, this is the first one. And I'm happy enough with it that I'm like, screw it. Let's just run with it. Maybe that rule that I have doesn't necessarily apply. I think it's because, generally speaking, the first thing I do is not something that I love. And that's why I've just assumed that for everything that I make, I have to go through multiple rounds of thumbnails. But maybe sometimes it's okay if it's just like, it's working. Because in this case, I feel like it's working. So I'm just adding chains around Lobo's forearm, which I feel to a certain degree having these circular forms wrapping around the wrist helps sell the foreshortening. And I'm going to just, in terms of creating a rhythm flowing through the piece, I'm going to have the chain. The idea is that you don't need to see the chain connecting to his arm, but just having it coming up this way. And I don't really like, it makes a bit of a tangent where it hits. So it's just a matter of changing the angle so that it feels like it's heading towards the, maybe I need to turn this harder. Oh no, I need to turn it less. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of seeing through this form, and I'm imagining, I'm going to erase this line, but what I'm imagining is it's coming from his wrist down and then coming up like this, and then going on that S curve where it wraps around. So instead of going up more, bringing it down. Let's see here. Amar says, if fun of you is your destination, you should welcome imperfections. So I was thinking of, it was Lobo before you said it, based on the belt. Thanks, I'm glad that it was able to read. It's a sign of a good thumbnail when you can figure out what the hell it is without having all the details. And Amar says, I am painting an affinity photo while I watch. Well, cool. What are you working on? I was curious to hear what everyone else has going on. In fact, for all you guys, for anyone watching, give a shout out in the chat, or even if you're watching later on and you're watching the replay, let me know what you're working on. I am curious to hear what everyone else has going on, because on one hand, you know, I'm doing a fan art piece. I'm doing, you know, just doing a few of them as a change of pace. Meanwhile, I've started a figure drawing class, and I've spent a lot of the weekend going over my work from that class, you know, making corrections and, you know, revising some studies. And there's things that I've learned that I want to go back and test out. So I'm like drawing and redrawing stuff from class. But it's more like, I would say it's more like running scenarios, different variations on how to execute and render things, different ways of describing form. So it doesn't feel like drudgery to me. It feels like experimentation, taking stuff into the art lab. But, you know, maybe you guys are working on some comics. Maybe you guys are just working on illustrations. Maybe you're writing. I am curious to hear what everyone out there is working on. How are you being creative this week? If you're not being creative, you know, what are you doing that you're enjoying? Because not everybody has to do something creative 24/7. That is, you know, while I frequently wish that I could do creative stuff 24/7, you know, real life gets in the way, and you know, can't always be at the art party. Let's see. Amar says I'm an idea for my a possible cover for my next issue for my comic. Yeah, that's something I actually don't think I posted it publicly, but I think on Patreon I published the cover that I plan to use for the collected second volume of Morningstar, containing issues 5, 6, 7, and 8. I don't have a release date for that trade yet. I figure, you know, I just got that 8th issue out, and mostly I'm going to try and keep those issues in print for a little while, just for people who, because of the pandemic, or I haven't done any conventions in a while, maybe hadn't had a chance to pick up. Maybe they've got the first 4 issues, but they haven't had a chance to pick up, the rest of the series. And if they maybe have like issue 5 or something, 5 or 6, I want them to be able to get the rest of them in issues if they so choose. But that said, there's nothing stopping me from putting out the trade for the rest of the 2. It's just that I have a couple of other things in motion that I need to get done before I get around to it. So it's sort of like, when I can get a little breathing space, a little bit of time, I will get that second trade out for those of you that are waiting on the trade. But I'll still try to keep issue 8 in print for a few months. All right, I'm getting a little bit too much into details and noodling, and that's stuff that I actually don't need. I think this is probably a good time for me to flip the screen, because for those of you who don't know, when you look at the mirror image of something you're drawing or painting, the mirror image shows you a lot of perspective flaws and mistakes you may have made. They just sort of jump out at you. So I will frequently use that as a tool to make corrections and adjustments. I want to refine the shapes, the volumes of Lobo's legs a little bit. And I think, I was thinking about moving the skull on his belt, but I don't feel like it really needs to move. It can leave, it can stay there. Actually, you know what? If I move it so it's facing more to the right, what it will do is it'll accentuate the contrapposto. Contrapposto is that thing that you see in a lot of figure drawings. Well, not just figure drawings, painting, sculptures. When you have a figure that it has the upper torso, the rib cage, facing one direction. Let's say it's facing to the left here. And then you've got the pelvis facing a different direction, to the right. That is what's called contrapposto. So you've got this facing this way, this facing that way. And I realize that as I've got Lobo here with his torso, his upper body facing this way, if I turn and move the buckle on his belt and go the other way, it'll really help enforce that sense of his body going and twisting. So it's a classic visual technique that the old masters used a lot, and it really helps sell gesture and movement. So it's worth refining. Damn it. Just trying to select all of this and erase it. There we go. Let's see here. Negro Fazetta in the chat says, I've been studying Jack Ham animal drawing for the past 3 hours. Now I'm flipping through my pen and ink books, looking at how good they are, and being scared of pen and ink drawing. You can't be scared of it. Here's the thing. No matter what you want to do, when you look at a book, a collection of works by any artist, that's their best work. They've been studying whatever it is that's in that book for decades. So when you first attempt it, your work is not going to hold up to theirs. But instead of looking at it like, oh, I can't try this because I'm not as good as these people, Look at their work as a flashlight in a dark room. Look at it as a torch that's guiding you. They're not trying to say, "Ha, you need to be as good as me or you suck." They are torchbearers lighting away a path for you in the darkness to say, "Oh wait, I can do this. I can do that." They're not saying you have to do it their way, but they're showing you what's possible with the medium. So I think if you change your mindset around studying pen and ink work of master illustrators, I think that will really free you up to explore and try and push yourself. Because yeah, if it's something that you have not mastered, and I mean for me, I still don't feel like I've mastered pen and ink, and I've been doing this for decades now. But if you haven't mastered it, then yeah, your work is not going to be where you want it to be. But this is how you get there. So don't be afraid of it. Don't be scared. Just hop on in there. Make bad art and then learn from the bad art that you make. That's what you hear me say it all the time. You got to dive in, face plant, and learn from the face plant. Let's see here. Amar said it very well. He said, "You have to be like a child. There should never be any fear when it comes to art. So once you accept your failures, then you can grow, you can learn and grow faster." Very, very true. Yes. I mean, and again, another thing that you've heard me say a million times, I learn way more from my bad drawings than I do from my good ones. That's gospel right there. Like that's my whole shtick, man. It's not like I'm intentionally trying to do it bad, but when I do something bad, that's when I see where my flaws are. And until I see, here's the thing, the flaws are there whether I see them or not. But once I see them, that's the only way I can really address them. You can't address flaws if you don't know they're there. And you learn that they're there by making something, trying to make it, and it's sucking. And you're saying, "Oh, well, let me take another stab at this," or, "Oh, I need to look at a book about this particular topic," or, "I need to find reference of this subject matter." That's how you do it. I'm just erasing all of this here so I can reposition the belt buckle. And that's another thing, is I used to be very afraid of, like, once I drew something, if I felt like I liked it, I got really upset about the idea of erasing something. So I'm like, well, it's working. I don't want to have to draw it again. If I can't recreate the belt buckle and the abs and the torso in the manner that I drew it the first time, then that means I'm just not very good at drawing them, because I should be able to recreate that in a reasonable amount of time. It shouldn't be like, oh, that was the last waistband I'm ever going to be able to draw again, and every time I do it, it's a giant sacrifice. In fact, it took me a long time to draw it the first time because I wasn't sure what I want. It was about decision making rather than skill. Now that I know the pose that I want, I should be able to recreate that very, very quickly. Go over here. It's real simple, just a skull with fangs. I don't need to go crazy with it. Let's see here. Amar says, "I almost never flip or rotate any drawing, but I'm hard-headed like that. I force myself to do something where you don't always have that luxury." Well, it's funny because, I was talking to some people and they were saying, well, what about when you're doing paintings? You can't just flip a painting. You can, if you're doing a drawing, you have a light box, that's fine. And I'm like, well, a lot of the old masters, so the people who knew the most about drawing in the history of art, they would just paint next to a mirror. And when they needed to see the mirror reflection, when they needed to flip their drawing, they just turn and they look at the reflection. They'll have the mirror angled so it'll be next to the painting so they can see the painting in the mirror. And they just look at it, look around, see if anything looks out of order, see if anything looks messed up. And they're like, oh yeah, that arm is off. Oh, this head is too small for this figure. Oh, those trees just make a weird compositional shape that didn't bother me when I look at the right one, when I see the reflection. And then they go back to the painting, and then they work for another hour and fix stuff. And then they come back and look. So, you know, the whole idea of flipping your drawings, looking at them upside down, everything that we have in modern day art are just tools to make that easier. But the old masters were doing it for ages. And I'm not saying that you have to flip your drawings, but I will tell you that I myself am also stubborn and hard-headed. Surprisingly, you might be surprised to find out that I'm more stubborn and hard-headed than you. My wife wouldn't be surprised by that. But yeah, I'm extremely stubborn and hard-headed. And I think what has happened to me over the years is I've seen what happens when I let go of that hard-headedness and actually try different stuff. And I'm like, oh, wow, why was I so stubborn and hard-headed? And flipping drawings is the #1 example of that. Because as I always say, my buddy Carl Altstetter, you know, comic creator, good friend, mentor, teacher, all around good human. When he and I first met, and he was kind of giving me tips about comics, and he showed me, you know, him flipping his drawings. And he was like, dude, you really got to start flipping your drawings. It will help you so much. And whenever I did it, all I saw was how crappy the drawings were. I just did not like being confronted with those ugly drawings. But he was telling me, you know, those mistakes are there whether you fix them or not. So it's up to you. And I will tell you that it probably took a good year of him harping on me about flipping my drawings before I started doing it. To the point where it is still a running gag between him and I every time we talk. You know, and it comes to, whenever he gives me advice, it always comes down to, yeah, well, you know, remember when I told you to start flipping your drawings? And once I started flipping my drawings, then there was the hard work of making the actual corrections. That's the real hard work, is accepting that there's these mistakes here and saying, all right, now I have to fix the mistakes. But once I did, and I started flipping my drawings, my draftsmanship elevated dramatically. And again, I always tell you, I am a student. I'm still learning. I'm still exploring and growing. But me getting into the habit of flipping my drawings was probably like one of the 2 biggest things that helped me elevate my my creative growth. The other one being attending figure drawing classes in person. So yeah, drawing from live models and flipping my drawings. Those are the 2 things that have had the biggest impact on my my artistic growth, and I highly recommend both of them. That is my sermon for today. All right. Let's see here. Amar says, I was told to start doing comics more than 20 years ago. And he said, so don't be me, he says to Negro Frazetta, worrying about perfection while comparing myself. Do it now while you're inspired before life gets in the way. Yes, yes, that's that right there. That's the quote for this episode. Do it now while you're inspired before life gets in the way. You know what, Amar? I think I'm going to title this video after that. That's what I'm going to use as the title for this one, because it's that's a really, really good quote. That's an excellent quote. Took a screenshot of that so I can remember to toss it in the when I'm going and re-editing this later in YouTube. He says a lot of people that people call masters also did something that people frown upon, which is tracing. Yeah, Norman Rockwell. Rockwell really, well, he didn't. That's a whole complicated subject. But Rockwell did not want to use cameras when they first became available, because in the golden age of illustration, it really was considered cheating. But Rockwell found a way to use the camera to speed up his work without tracing per se. And again, I don't think that tracing is necessarily bad, but Rockwell found a way to make it work where he kind of combined, he wasn't tracing, but what he was doing is he was redrawing from photo reference that he art directed. But regardless, point being is that I remember when this was before I even started working as a professional, but my first ongoing art job was as an illustrator at my school newspaper in college, because I did in fact get paid for that. So it was, it was a job. But I remember one of the things that the art director for the newspaper told me my freshman year, and he just said that there's, when it comes to illustration, there's no cheating. There's just hitting your deadline. You do what you got to do to get a piece done. It says, Amar says, I get the benefits, understand the why behind it, but most of the time, the reason why drawings are distorted is because you're not sitting in your prime sitting position. Once you're sitting and creating in the prime sitting and view position of your art, you also find that when you flip your drawing, those errors would not be there, or if they are, they would be very minimal. Chrono Rust says, great sermon. It's your Sunday art sermon. Amar says, most of the issues when I am lazily drawing in various positions, tracing is also a tool, and tracing is not as easy as people think it is. When you do photo or hyperrealism, that's what a lot of those artists, yes, that is what a lot of those artists do. But again, I've got a whole video on Norman Rockwell's process. And what Rockwell would do is he would art direct photo shoots. So whether you consider working from a photo cheating or not, which I absolutely do not, he was working from, he would do his, I've said this before, he would do sketches. His thumbnails would not be any more detailed than the thumbnails I'm drawing right now. Sometimes they'd be less detailed. But then what he would do is, based on those thumbnails, he would work with the photographer, sit down, explain to the photographer what he wanted. He would hire models, sometimes multiple models for the same pose, try them out. He would be there with the photographer saying, no, get it from this angle, get it from that angle. So the photographer was really working as a camera operator. So it's more like Rockwell was the director and the photographer was like the DP. They would get the lighting right, make sure that everything looked good and looked the way Rockwell wanted it. But Rockwell was directing the photo shoot. And when it was done, he would have a bunch of photos, and he would take bits and pieces from each photo. He might take a head from one photo, a dress from another, a shoulder from another, shoes from a different photo, and combine different models, different body parts, and combine all of it into sort of a collage. And then, based on the collage, which is he art directed, he would then put that into a composite drawing, which he would trace. And even then, when you look at it, you can look at the Rockwell pieces, and even if someone tells you, yes, he traced that from a photo, here's the real question for you. If Rockwell, which he did, if he traced his reference into a composite drawing, if those are tracings, why do they all look like Rockwell drawings? Because even if you trace it, you're putting some of yourself into that piece, or at least you should be. And I think the tracing that looks bad is tracing where the artist did not put any of themselves into the piece. That's the problem. I think that right there that explains, I think, all of the bad or negative ideas people have about tracing. Is tracing's only bad if you don't add anything. If you don't put anything in yourself into it, that's when you get really dead and stiff looking work. But if you are adding to it, if you're putting some vision, some creativity into that piece, then it should look good. And it might be something where, I mean, I'm not a photorealistic artist, but I definitely believe in the value of reference. And the reference should enhance your work. It shouldn't control it. Byron says, tracing at most can give you the outline, but the rendering is still, the rendering stage is still on your own skill. Well, you know, I agree with you. However, I do think that when it comes to rendering, again, I think that reference can be very, very helpful in the sense that it can show you, it can help you describe what those major forms are that you are rendering. So it's up to you in terms of what style you want to render, how detailed you want that rendering to be. It's up to you how you're going to execute that. But reference, particularly photo reference, can be very, very useful in terms of showing you where those things go, making sure that you actually are rendering those forms in a logical manner, that you're keeping the lighting consistent across the figure, letting you show what the lighting actually is. And maybe even there might be something in the photo which, through a weird trick of light, does not look consistent. And you have to be an artist enough to look at that and say, all right, this is what the reference says, but when I look at that visually, it won't make sense in the piece. And then being able to make that conscious choice to edit the image, to edit the photo on the page or on the canvas. Let's see here. Chrono Rust says, tracing when I was younger helped getting mileage with practicing line control, even inking, getting kind of a taste in works that were created with a higher skill than me. You know, that is a very, very good point. You know, another thing that people don't necessarily talk about, because I think that when I was in art school in the 90s, academic drawing was not really taught. And academic drawing is what it sounds like. It was what was taught in the academies, the drawing academies. And it really comes down to a traditional system of rendering and describing form and volume and light and gesture. And part of that process was studying from master drawings. Usually, whatever studio you were in, the master of that studio, the person who ran that art school, that art academy, would have a series of works for students to study from. You know what? I am not happy with this leg. Just erase all of that except for the feet. As a matter of fact, just erase the feet altogether. I'm going to try a little trick that I've been using in figure drawing class. But yeah, frequently in academic drawing, you were studying from people who were highly experienced. You would study from masters, you know, from the century before, from several centuries before, depending on whether you're talking like Renaissance time or going even farther back. But usually the heads of the school would have a collection of artwork done by fine masters of the previous eras. And part of your work as a student was copying those drawings or copying the instructor's drawings, trying to learn from them and decipher why they made the artistic decisions that they made. So something that I personally have a problem with proportion. I've always sucked at proportion. Um, and anytime anyone has anything nice to say about proportions in my drawings, I'm extremely grateful because I had to work my ass off to be able to do it. But recently in figure drawing class, I was looking at figures and I was saying, maybe, because what I tend to do is I tend to draw a line and say, okay, this is going to be the height of the full figure. So whatever gesture or pose I put the character in, they're going to fit in that height. But something that I tried recently was instead of drawing, let me just undo that. Instead of drawing outward from the torso, drawing the rest of the limbs, what I actually started doing was kind of working backwards. Like I would look at the figure and I would figure out, all right, well, based on the torso, how far down is the foot or the ankle, how far to the left or right of the pelvis it is, and then go, all right, I'm going to put the foot here, then I can just make it a straight shot back. And then let's say that I've got one foot that's up on its toes. I can say, all right, let's say this foot is back a little bit. I might put the ball of the foot down there, the ankle up here, and then have the knee going up and then back. Then let's say for this guy, I'm going to have the hand out here, and I might say, all right, hands out here, elbow goes up, then over to the shoulder. Then one hand is like, let's say it's up in the air, coming foreshortened like Jack Kirby. I might say, all right, foreshorten that way, and then foreshorten that way. I have to come in with some curved lines. My point being is that this seems to be helping with my proportions. And I say this as somebody who always struggles with proportion. There's never a point where I'm like, okay, I've really got my proportions down now. Everything's locked in. I've got this. If I get lazy at any point in a drawing, proportions get wonky. So it's a constant battle for me, and I'm constantly looking at new ways to try and help and improve my proportion. And the whole idea of drawing from the torso, drawing from the hands and feet inward towards the torso, so figuring out where the absolute limits of the pose are and bringing them in, as opposed to moving outward and possibly having legs that are too long or too short, that seems to give me a better sense of proportion. So I realized, why don't I try that with Lobo here? So let's see here. Some more in the chat. Let's see. Byron says, tracing as practice is quite helpful. Most children learn to draw from tracing and copying better artists. Very true. I used to trace drawings out of magazines. My mom always had tracing paper laying around the house, so I would grab that to do some sketches from. This is what I was resisting, was erasing these parts of Deadpool's legs and his knees, because I really liked that I nailed that foreshortening. But if I can't draw that again, then it means I don't really have it mastered. So I shouldn't be afraid of just going in there and tearing that off. Yeah, Byron says the only time tracing is bad is when you're completely passing off someone else's work as your own and making money from it. Negro Frazetta says to Amar, I have to go downstairs, blah, blah, blah. We'll go advice. Good. All right. So I'm just kind of making a light ground plane here to establish how far back this foot's going to be. Yeah, I don't need to have it that light. I mean, that dark. So I'm just putting a simple volume foot here. To be honest, I shouldn't even be doing that much. I should just be having a simple square for that shape. Yeah, just instead of getting a little bit too complicated, I'm getting too caught up in the details there. So what I'm trying to go for is the thigh just moving, going a little bit backwards in space. And then getting to the lower leg, and that's the part that's super foreshortened. And then getting to the boot, this change in direction. And to be honest, all of this back here, I can probably do in silhouette. You don't really need much light or detail. And it's funny, when I am in the habit of doing figure drawing regularly, I can feel the difference in anything I draw. Comic work, illustrations, studies, just doodles. I think because I can fall into the habit of just sort of automatic drawing and not really being as conscious as I should be of form and volume. Like I can just be drawing kind of cool gestury shapes, but not necessarily capturing or saying anything with them. And I think I'm gonna bring Lobo's waist in a little bit. He's a beefy, but it's really that he's beefy up in his shoulders and arms. There are not a ton of mainstream characters that I would want to draw a comic of, but Lobo, I think, would be one of those. It would be really cool to work on. Now see, now that I've got this, I see that I need to move the shoulder back a little bit more. When I say move it back, I mean that I have it rotated in sort of the wrong way. Like we're looking at too much at the top of the shoulder, when really the arm should be rotated so that we're looking, the bicep should be facing us more, is my point. Still going in the same direction, but I'm changing the direction the planes are facing. So like let's say that before, when I was drawing it, if we make it a box, let's say it's a box that was facing away and we were looking kind of at a little bit of the front and top. And really what we need to be looking at is the front and maybe a little bit of the underside instead. Although it can't be that much of the underside. Really, it kind of needs to be, it kind of needs to be straight on, because if you turn it this way, the problem is then becomes that the elbow needs to be bent this way. So it's a subtle distinction, because if I have it turned this way, that's kind of what he's doing, but really what he's doing is you're looking, yeah, it's almost straight on, because really what you should be looking at is this. Because what I want is for the angle that the arm is at to make sense. So it's not as off as I had it. I just realized I need to put, really, I just need to have the bicep push up here a little bit more and have the shoulder rolled back some. If these little diagrams I did made any sense, this last one is closer to what the arm should be doing. The first one was sort of more, this one was more of what it had in there. So I just need to adjust the shoulder a little bit more. Let me get rid of all of that. Let's see here. Chrono Rust says, the truth. As soon as I fell off figure drawing and gesture drawing, I immediately felt shameful putting pencil to page, but I'm getting back at it. Well, you know, I mean, while I very much see a big difference in my own work between when I am actively doing figure drawing and attending figure drawing sessions and when I'm not, that's not true for every artist. So I highly recommend it to people. But I mean, I've met people who rarely go to figure drawing classes and still produce phenomenal work. So, you know, that's one of those things where I highly recommend it. But if someone's like, hey, I don't need that, or it's not for me, or they don't really see a difference when they don't go to figure drawing classes, it's like, all right, you know. I mean, some people are self-taught and they've never set foot in a figure drawing class in their life, and they draw just fine. I look at it more sort of like, you know, if you're healthy and you're living well, you know, then, and you've got a balanced diet, then maybe you don't need to take a certain medicine, or you don't need to be, you know, doing certain health fads that other people are doing. But if you're, you know, not sleeping well, or you're having chest pains, you've got high blood pressure, and that's when you say, oh, maybe I need to try this. So I look at all of these things that I talk about as ways to try and help with any art issues that you have. But if you don't have any art issues, but my point being is, it's completely normal, I think, to also feel out of sorts if you haven't been figure drawing or doing studies, I'd say put the feeling a sense of shame away, because that'll just make you. I think that anything that adds negative association to the creative process is bad. So it is good to want to figure draw and to stay on top of it. I don't think it's good to necessarily shame yourself. I think that it's much better. And I know you weren't trying to get super deep and intense about this. This is just something I'm going off on because I don't know, I think for other people listening, they themselves might feel shame about not doing figure drawing. And what I do advocate is similar to what Amar said early on, finding the fun in things, such that, for some people, figure drawing may not be their thing. But for me, I look at it as when I don't do it, I miss it. The same way that when I don't go to a restaurant that's really good food, I miss that. For me, it feeds my soul. It feeds me artistically and it feeds me creatively. So I don't want it to be something where, it's penalizing my art if I'm not doing it. Like, I generally do feel like if I'm not going to figure drawing class, I can feel kind of a regression in my art. But I don't want that to be. I try not to let the negative mindset creep in. I try to keep it focused on what are the things and honestly, if I'm not able to figure draw, from models, then I'll just work from studies of classical sculptures. I've got a bunch of little statues around my house. This is a little bust of Michelangelo's David that I've got. I've got like a bunch of busts like these, and my wife got me a really nice statue for my birthday of a veiled bust. Got my handy dandy skull here, life size. I'll put this just on a black cloth and just light that and do a still life. Like, I'm doing it more of an anatomical study than it is like I'm trying to just draw a skull still life. But, those are all the kind of things I'll do if I can't get to figure drawing class. Where I can't, for whatever reason, something's preventing me from being able to spend some time doing that, then I'll try to make time to do little studies like that. I mean, I've even got I've got a mini skull at my desk at work, and whenever I'm saving large files where it may take if I'm working on something that's like almost a gig, and it may take not super long, but it may take like a full minute or two to save, sometimes, maybe 2 minutes or longer, then I'll just have like a clipboard next to me with a scrap sheet of paper, and I'll just have a skull set up, and then every 15 minutes or so when I'm saving, just grab the pad and just sketch a little bit. Now Lobo's arm looks wonky. I think it's because I'm trying too hard to make his arm go back instead of just having it go forward. That's the problem here. I was trying to have him have his arm pulled back. Instead, I think what this really needs is it's going forward, and then just when you get to his forearm, it goes extremely foreshortened. Yeah, that feels a lot better. I'm going to clear a little bit of space so I can have his big ass shoulders come all the way around. Much as I like that jacket, I think I need to erase this and draw the anatomy through here to make this make sense, and then just draw the shoulder over it again. That is something that I learned in figure drawing class, is that frequently you can use clothing to describe the anatomy. You know, you can use a seam as a cross-axis line to kind of show you, oh, this is where the form is going. And if you want to describe it properly, you just run the clothing in that shape. So now I'm trying to, this is what I was missing, which is that the arm, the pecs stretching out. And then also the I think it's the brachialis muscle. I can't remember if it's up here or whether it's lower. I think this is the coracobrachialis, the one that this little guy in here that reaches in from the arm and across the pecs. It's either the brachialis or the coracobrachialis. You know what? It drives me nuts. The people in art book study group have actually had to put up with this. But whenever we're doing studies, if there's a muscle in there that I don't know, okay, when I was a little kid, my parents taught me if I didn't know a word, they said, well, I say, what's that mean? They said, you know where the dictionary is. They would make me go to the dictionary and look it up. So consequently, it definitely improved my vocabulary. I've had a lifelong habit of looking up words. That has bled into anatomy, where now if I'm studying and I'm drawing something, I don't know the name of a muscle, I am compelled to look it up because I do know the name of that muscle. I've done studies of that muscle, and the fact that information hasn't stuck in my head bothers me, so I always have to look it up to kind of reinforce it. Atlas of Human Anatomy for the Artists by Stephen Peck. This is my my go-to anatomy book. And it is the coracobrachialis, and it's underneath the bicep. It kind of wedges in between the bicep and the tricep. Yeah, the coracobrachialis is on the inside. The brachialis is on the outside, sort of between the bicep and tricep. Which I never really noticed that. That'll probably help with me remembering them, is that they're the brachialis and the coracobrachialis, one's on the inside. They're both separating the bicep from the tricep. One separating it on the inside, the coracobrachialis, one separating on the outside, the brachialis. I never thought of it that way, but that will help me, I think, in terms of remembering which one's which. The only thing I'm looking up right now is where the origin of the coracobrachialis is, because it makes sense to me that it would be attached to the coracoid process, which is part of the shoulder blade that actually moves forward. A lot of pec muscles are attached to it to pull the arm. Brachiobrachialis origin. Yep, scapula. The coracoid process. So origins and insertions. For those who aren't anatomy junkies, the origin is where the muscle starts. The insertion is where it connects to the bone that it's pulling. So, you know, the origin is its anchor, and the insertion is what it's grabbing and pulling, because that's what muscles do. They contract, they pull to move the anatomy. And this is the medial margin of the humerus. So it's a thin muscle that lies in between the bicep and tricep. It attaches inside of your body and your shoulder blade, and it kind of attaches in the middle on the side of the humerus. And that is this little guy right here that I'm drawing. And it just bugged me that I couldn't remember the name of it. Yeah, I go on little tangents like this during the art book study group all the time. So if you love this, then you should join. If you're like, nah, anatomy's not my thing, then it's not your thing. I mean, it's an interesting question in terms of how much anatomy do you really need to know as an artist? And I guess it really depends on what you want to draw. I mean, if you've got a great understanding of volume and form, you can create compelling art that isn't necessarily anatomically correct. Or if you just know that the general shape of the muscle groups, but you don't know their name, you don't know all the individual muscles, you can still make good art. I think that's also something that people might debate. Some people would say, no, if you're going to be a figurative artist, you need to know anatomy. And I think there's a lot of art. I think that there are artists out there. There's a lot of artists who don't know anatomy, but they also don't know basic conceptual volumes or the general shapes of forms. And that's where you look at, oh, well, they just have bad anatomy. I think that if you were to take the same person and just give them a really great sense of form and volume and the basic muscle groups without having to have an exhaustive encyclopedic knowledge of anatomy, I think that you know, would be just fine. But also, who am I to decide what people should or shouldn't know? I know what I think helps me, and I know what I know. I know what I think makes good art, but people are always welcome to disagree. I think disagreement and debate is healthy. I think it's good to question. I mean, I frequently question my own ideas about the nature of art, what I do need to know, what has value. And I question those things because it helps me strengthen why I want to know what I need to know. I don't think there's a much that I've really looked at and said, oh, it turns out I didn't need that. It tends to be that I refine my understanding of why I need things or why I'm studying certain things. And now that I did that arm, I feel like I need to do the same thing with his other arm. Yeah, now that I've done this, that looks really, really wonky. I feel like I should actually make Lobo's other arm come down and then up from behind. So I'm going to erase all of these guts here. And yeah, for a piece of fan art, I'm doing a lot of work. But the reason for that is simply I want it to look good. And I feel like doing this work, it's not grunt work for grunt work's sake. It is me improving my ability to do this faster and faster. It's like I'm using this the same way that I would use, study and figure drawing class. I'm using drawing these things, doing these studies as an opportunity to try and improve and speed up my ability to do these things in the future. I'm going to bulge this a little bit more because he's flexing a little bit. I'm looking at the time here, and we are over about an hour and 15. So I think we're about time to wrap it up. Yeah. So still a ways to go on this Lobo piece. But just the act of going through and doing that put it in front here. That right there already makes this thing feel more solid. And now I can just have blood arcing across the bicep. And it's not that I necessarily change anything with the composition, I just refine the anatomy. Pretty simply, too, which is, again, this is what I'm going for in these pieces, is just looking at trying to improve yet simplify my anatomy. Not more anatomy, just clearer anatomy. Yeah, I think that's working. Race through that. Yeah, I pretty much got rid of a big chunk of his jacket, but I'm going to come back and draw all that in. Yeah, the nice thing about that book that I was looking at, the Peck Anatomy book, is that it's got a little chart in there for each section of the body where it tells you where the bones, where their origin is, where their insertion is, and then it tells you this is what it does. Which is useful because, explaining the action of a muscle can really help you understand better, why you're drawing it the shape you're doing, or it'll help you understand why the shape changes the way it does when it's flexed or relaxed. Yeah, I'm really beefing him up here. You know what's funny is I could totally see doing a Wolverine versus a Lobo piece, but it wouldn't be fighting; it'd be a drinking contest. I'm just doing fan art pieces that nobody's asking for, but they sound fun to me. I need at some point I need to get back to working on original creations. When I do, it'll probably be working on that cover that I mentioned for Morningstar Volume 2, which will collect the second set of issues 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, guys. Let's wrap it up here. So again, thank you so much for spending time with me, hanging out. Feel free to leave comments later on. I try to get back and respond to all of them. And if you ask something particularly complicated and detailed, we can talk about it in the next live stream. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys are working on, what you're doing, what you're enjoying making, what's inspiring you. Again, patreon.com/GERIMI. Help support this channel, make these videos possible. You get 2 bonus live streams once a month, and it's close to an hour long. These are like 2 to 3 hour live streams. It's called Art Book Study Group. We do deep dives into art books and we sketch from them, study, learn, see what they have to offer. We've been slowly working our way through Walt Reed's The Figure. That's the book that we've been doing recently. There's videos on there from books by George Bridgman. Can't remember if we've done the Andrew Loomis. But Ken Holtgren's The Art of Animal Drawing. All books like that we do deep dives in. Tons of other bonuses, being able to read my comics for free on Patreon. All of that, patreon.com/GERIMI. Newsletter.jeremy.net. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook and get a newsletter delivered to your inbox once a month, filled with work-in-progress gifts, new artwork, new pieces I have available, you go sign up for my newsletter.jeremy.net. And you go to amazon.jeremy.net to pick up physical copies of my comics. My first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It's a self-contained psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up Volume 1 of Morningstar. It's Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. That's issues 1 through 4. And the most recent released, the final issue of Morningstar, is at my main site, jeremy.net. You can pick this up. It's a double-sized 40-page issue. All of that available at my various sites. There's links in the description. If you hit the link tree, you'll have links for all those different sites on there. So definitely, please check that out. Again, I appreciate you guys spending time, hanging out. It's really good, as always. Thank you guys. Amar, thanks for hanging out and watching. Russ, thanks for joining. Byron, you too. Everyone else, that's it for now. Go be creative.